The key thing to remember is that restaurants play a really important part just in our mental well-being, right? Going out and being able to eat at a restaurant improves our mental state. It improves our sense of community. If you look at the things that people say they're looking forward to, it's that dining in restaurants helps them feel normal again. That eating at restaurants reminds them of better times. You know, these are the things that we should be playing toward, that return to normalcy and just how it makes the person feel. It's not just how the food tastes or anything, but like that almost indescribable sense that a restaurant can convey to its guests. Check out this stat. 72% of consumers do not trust others to act responsibly once businesses reopen. Right? That is a staggeringly high number. So this is one thing to remember. If you're thinking about the setup of your dining room or your operation or whatever it may be, it needs to be optimized not just for your staff interactions with the customer and your customer interactions with the store, but the interactions between customers and other customers. So, and that's probably one of the hardest things to conceptualize. It's how does table A interact with table B and everything in between? When someone goes, if there's a line at the restroom, what does that potentially mean? You know, if people are sort of, if there's a forced interaction that way. Now, this may very well be a thing where it just diminishes over time naturally because we'll get used to stuff. But at least initially, some of the potential freak out, thinking could happen more customer to customer than customer to staff or customer to table or what have you. So here's another one. This one I think is much harder to guess. Which foods do consumers most miss getting from restaurants? So this is a combination of what type of foods do you like, and also a combination of what stuff have you not been able to get. So this could be, a general type of food. It could be a specific, type of food item. Use chat. What do you think this is? I'll give you like 30 seconds because I'm curious to see what you all think. Which foods or types of foods, do consumers most miss from restaurants? And Mike, Renee, I don't know if you've seen the answer yet.
I don't remember it now.
This one I thought was actually not shocking, but I thought it was surprising.
I was surprised too, yeah. Most people in the chat are saying sushi. There's a lot of sushi and seafood.
I was thinking, that's the one thing that I love.
That's my answer too, to be honest. Although I do have to say that Nashville is not the center of sushi, the sushi universe. So my options are already limited.
Lots of guesses though.
Any other guesses in there that rose to the top?
Lots of Mexican, steak.
You said Mexican? Mm-hmm. I never would have guessed that, but that's actually the number one thing. More votes for Mexican than anything else, and by a statistically significant margin. Mm-hmm. I think the list is actually really interesting. This is not necessarily a pure ranking of foods that just people love overall, because that actually looks different. We actually know that from our other data sets. But here you have like Mexican in the one spot. Mm-hmm. Seafood is up there because we're not doing that at home so much. Right? And you can see sushi is much higher on this list than it would normally be. If you asked the general public, what do do more people love sushi or do more people love fried chicken? I don't think it's really a contest, but here, sushi actually noses out fried chicken. Then you go all the way down to the bottom, and some of these are categories that people love, right? Like the love for mac and cheese is extraordinarily high. We know that from our flavor tool. But people been eating a lot of mac and cheese at home for the last 6 weeks. So it's not the first thing that they're going out and craving. So I think what's actually going to happen is it's going to look something a little bit like this. Imagine your first trip back to your favorite restaurant that you haven't been to in a while. You are going to go in, you already know what you want before you get there. Just give me my favorites. Maybe in this next time you come back, you're thinking, yeah, I'm probably still going to stick with my tried and true dishes. I, want to get this out of my system a little bit. But by the time you get your third visit back, you maybe change a little bit. You're saying, nah, maybe I'll still get that entree that I love, but I might try to mix it up a little bit with a different appetizer or something. You get a little variety and try something a little bit new. And then on the fourth trip, I'm starting to feel more adventurous. And on the 5th trip, it's like, hey, I'm a trendy foodie. What new thing do you have for me? I want something completely new. And this is the message for the entire industry. Do not be lulled into thinking that consumers just want to eat an endless supply of meatloaf and comfort foods based on the early receipts you see as you first reopen. When you first reopen, people will want their comfortable, familiar favorites. As those trips progress, they're going to want something new. Keep that innovation pipeline full, or you will lose your customer after maybe the 2nd or 3rd trip. And that really is the key to the industry. So keep innovation going.
Yeah. And then Waffle House. So I saw a couple people in the chat talking about Waffle House. So Waffle House, you might have heard of that Waffle House index that FEMA uses to see if they should send some money towards the disaster relief area, just because if Waffle House closes down, you know, things are pretty serious there. So people are kind of watching Waffle House to see when they will open back up. And you know, what you see at Waffle House is pretty typical. I think you'll see at almost every location across the country. So there's going to be some tables and chairs that are blacked off. You can see they blacked it off with tape here. They used bags in the previous picture. You know, cutting down touch points all throughout the restaurant. Touch points, touch points, touch points. I know pretty much every restaurant right now is kind of going through their front of house and back of house and seeing where there are touch points and cutting them down. And then the other thing is just, you know, sanitizer everywhere. Sanitizer on the tables, sanitizer when you walk in the door. You know, that's what we're definitely going to see a lot of.
Whether or not consumers are actually ready to go into the restaurant, how would they feel about you opening your restaurant? Like, is there a sentiment that if you open up on day 1 when it's allowed, that some of the potential customers are going to say, ooh, I don't know if I like that, and I'm not going to think very well of a chain or an independent or any restaurant that opens immediately and, you know, potentially damage your brand in doing so. So we actually asked consumers to imagine that very scenario. You know, how do you feel if your favorite chain restaurant, in this case, opened up for dine-in service on the very first day that it was allowed? And I was actually a little bit surprised. I actually think these results are much more positive than I would have expected. You know, about half the people say it doesn't really bother me one way or the other. Almost 30% say this would actually be really positive. I think they should open up as quick as possible. And only about half as many, about 16%, said, you know what, this would be irresponsible. I would think less of the brand if they opened up on day 1. So basically, if the state says it's okay, you probably are, from a brand perception perspective, like we're not even talking about safety at this point, but just from a consumer perception of a brand perspective, you're probably okay to actually open up fairly quickly following when you're allowed to. And keep in mind too, this is asked at a time when we're just talking about early states, and there's a big debate about whether things should be open at all, right? So as time rolls on, and let's say you get to like the next batch and the next batch of states, I think that positive reaction number will only increase for those, because we'll hopefully be a little bit out of this time of this giant debate about, you know, boy, this is just way too early. If you remember last week, we looked at May 1st, you know, today basically, as a target date, and most consumers said, yeah, May 1st is a little bit too early. But even given that, only 16% say, hey, if you open up on the first day it's allowed in our state, the rest of us think it's going to be fine, the other 84%. So if the state says it's okay, that is a fairly good indicator that most consumers will at least be, not against you.
And this is just a little rundown of some of the common practices that I think we're going to start seeing pretty much everywhere. It's almost like the standard, you know, the wiping down tables, sanitizing, and limited time being at tables, things like that. And then some of the next level things, there's a lot of places that are doing A and B staff teams, so splitting it up so that there's one team, several days a week, and then the other days, and that
So
way
you don't intermix, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't intermix, and that way if somebody on A team gets sick, you're not affecting your entire staff. And then some of those things like the permanent redesign of space. Not sure we're gonna actually see those like rugs and whatnot, but some of those more next level things.